Before we get into this podcast, I want to give a huge thank you to our production team over at Hire, spelled Hyre, formerly known as Hey Lou. Yep, they rebranded. Go check out HYREUP.com. That's hireup.com to find an amazing A-plus rockstar talent VA like the ones who produce this podcast and actually serve as moving consultants at Two College Brothers. And now I want to just say thank you to the nearly 300 people who have already bought their tickets to the upcoming Moving Titan Retreat. We're counting down the days, and we can't wait to see a whole bunch of new faces and a whole bunch of familiar OG faces out there. We're going to have some amazing speakers, predominantly in the moving industry, but we have a headline appearance by Brad Lee from the Dropping Bombs podcast. Go check him out if you haven't already. He brings a ton of value. And I'm really excited to announce that we're going to be rolling out Tighten Up Training 2.0. We've been beta testing this all summer with Two College Brothers, and we actually replaced a Trainual with it. And we have brought over all of our SOPs to the new version of Tighten Up Training that's much more interactive. We've actually been working with Brad Lee and his whole team over at Lightspeed to reassemble it, break it down to the bare bones, and rebuild it into something way better with Tighten Up Training 2.0. And it's the same great content that's been on there that you've been training your movers on and your salespeople on and everybody else, but it'll now have the ability to add your own SOPs. Don't have SOPs? No problem. We're going to be offering a solution to help you with that too at the Moving Titan Retreat. But come see us September 10th through the 12th. It's at the Tradewinds Resort in beautiful, my hometown, St. Pete Beach, Florida. You'll fly into Tampa, spend 3 days with us. We're going to be masterminding, collaborating, brainstorming, talking about our troubles and our roadblocks, helping one another get past it. And we've also got a lot of fun planned for it. It's a beautiful 7-acre resort. Bring your spouse, bring your whole family, and best for last, we're going to be having a pickleball tournament. I'm actually getting ready to go play some pickleball right now after this podcast. So come see me September 10th to the 12th at the Moving Titan Retreat in St. Pete Beach, Florida. Fly into Tampa, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Go visit movingtitanretreats.com. That's movingtitanretreats.com to grab your tickets. You don't want to miss out on some of the latest innovations that are going to be announced at this largest moving industry event for independent movers in North America. So we hope to see you there. Actually, it might be the world. Hope to see you there. Tighten up.
And it was kind of cool because, as you said, there's not many of us out there that do moving law. So it's the Wild West. There is no script. There's no book to read. There's nothing out there. There's ancillary things that you can read about, or things that you can maybe connect the dots on. But you're inventing yourself essentially. On top of the compliance, big one is intellectual property, and this is really, really, really overlooked. What you have is it's unfortunate, a very unfortunate thing. A lot of bad actors are out there, and they're ripping off the good guys' names. They're just using it. Say, for example, and I'm not going to use specifics, but typically it's a good idea to get a release on there with a non-disparagement provision. Now, This is again where it gets very tricky, because there's a law that actually will make one believe that there is a ban on non-disparagement in that situation. However, there's a workaround to that law, because the intent of that law is more form contracts.
Welcome back to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Wade Sweikel, with Two College Brothers Moving and Storage, as well as the Moving Titans. And today's guest has helped both Two College Brothers Moving and Storage, as well as the Moving Titans. And that is Mr. Patrick Mayerbock with Mayerbock Law. And he is a attorney who specializes in helping with the moving industry. That's 75 to 80% of his caseload, and he specializes in building relationships. And we've gotten to know Patrick very well across both of the companies over the last couple of years, and he is a true savage, if I do say so myself. And I am extremely excited to have you on the podcast, because I've never interviewed anybody that specializes in moving law. We used to work with somebody before you that was he was basically retiring, got out of it. He was old school, older gentleman, and he was, well known in the industry. But since we started working with you, I mean, you do everything from handling our contracts and getting us dialed in from a preventive standpoint, as well as handling disputes or anything that comes up in the high risk, high liability, but also potentially high reward industry that is moving.
Yep.
And I'm sure as long as moving companies are around, you will have no shortage in work, especially with the way that you work, Patrick. But welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to kind of talk law, legalese, if you will. But,
well, it's a sincere honor and privilege. I have to say, working with you and your team, both on the Titan side and on the two college side. And I'm not just saying this; you guys are second to none, top notch. It's always, you get candidly as an attorney, you have you're going through your list of what to do for the day, and I take a look. Okay, what do I have to do? Oh, that one. When I see two college or movie Titans, it's, oh yes, I get to, it's a fun conversation. So I always enjoy those. And honestly, that's the best part of the business, are getting to know people like yourselves. Great team.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I guess for the audience who hasn't heard about you, and I know you've worked with several of the moving Titans, some of the OGs, and I think that's probably how we got to know you. But I guess tell in your own words, how did you get to be focusing on this niche that is moving, storage, transportation, and what separates you, in your own words, from all the other attorneys that people might be trying to use? Although I'll have to say probably less effectively.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And Savage, I like that. I've been called a lot worse, and I'll tell you what, that's on the good list. That's on the excellent spectrum. So I might have to, I don't know. I'm going to do some sort of intellectual property thing to, maybe we'll trademark it. That sounds good. But,
hey, there you go.
Savage attorney. So, it's kind of a, it's a long drawn out story, but to put it quite simply, I really am where I'm supposed to be. And kind of going way back, I grew up blue collar Chicago, nothing fancy. I come from the big, from the big postal service money for a letter carrier. My old man worked very hard. My mom worked very hard, but we worked growing up, and we were, it was a great upbringing, but at the same time, we weren't given anything. I actually grew up, many of your viewers, as well as yourself, know Brian Slater. So shout out to the Northwest Side, Brian. We grew up about a block and a half away from each other, although we were in rival schools, so we didn't like each other. And then we still sometimes don't like each other based on the day it is, but most days we do. So lo and behold, I, grew up in Northwest Side of Chicago. Very, very, very good, wholesome upbringing in the sense that, always had what I need. But at the same time, my dad, from the time I was young, was like, you're going to be an attorney. And I didn't even know what an attorney did. At the end of I just wanted to drive a big truck or, do the Tonka life with big equipment, which actually, believe it or not, is a hobby of mine on the side. Kind of weird. But, so, I grew up, I was, by the grace of God, I was fairly successful at school. Went to St. Edward Grade School, St. Patrick High School, both of which I'm still very, very involved with today. And then went to University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana on a full tuition scholarship. Didn't even know then that I wanted to be an attorney. I majored in political science. Had a lot of fun in college, so the experience was well worth it. But once you get out of college, you're kind of faced with the, hey, this is great. I have a nice piece of paper. What do I do with it? So that ringing in the ear says, okay, well, you got to do law school. So I'm like, started gearing myself up. I took a year off in between undergrad and law school. Worked construction actually with one of my best friends, and which was great. It was a party every day, and I won't get into some of the nitty gritty details because it's a family show. But working construction with your buddies is always a trip. So did well. Got into law school. Did well in law school. Worked full time throughout law school. So at the same time, I was very fortunate to, while I was taking the legal end of things, I worked for an IT company, which is something that I just fell into. I had no knowledge of IT, no experience, and no real love for it. But at the same time, I was put on the quasi legal / business end. So it was software licensing, pertaining to some very specific nuanced software that most people have never heard of. Half of it I don't even remember, but it allowed me to just learn kind of the game in terms of business. And, so I would have my own book of business. I would have to maintain it. I would have to service it. I would have to, deal with the problems, all that good stuff. And simultaneously, I was going to law school and learning the law. So, at that point, it was kind of, I got through law school. I really didn't even plan on at the time still becoming a practicing attorney. In my mind, I was going to go federal law enforcement, because where I grew up, you either become a cop, fireman, or a tradesman of some sort. That's it. Or there's other bad stories, but we won't even get into that. The norm, like people who made it, are the cop, fireman, trade worker sort of thing. And so I got out of law school, and actually I was hired in a federal law enforcement position, but it was right at the time when I was about to go to training for that, and I hadn't even taken the bar. I get a call. There was a huge drop in funding. So they're like, hey, guess what? We love you, but we can't take you. So here I am. I'm still working at the IT job, and which was great to me. I mean, CDW is what it was called, and they were tremendous. Very patient, very, very supportive. So I'm like, okay, well, one of the people that I trust in the neighborhood, he was like the neighborhood legend attorney, this Ed Chanu, and he was like a second dad to me. God rest his soul. But he, I would go to Ed for mentorship and advice, because like he was the only one around, and he knew what he was talking about. When I say he was a legend, he was kind of tied with some of the powers that be in the Chicago legal world. And he knew it all. And he was just very, very good. And he had this very interesting personality. He was hilarious. Every time you meet with him, you'd feel like you're going to have a heart attack, because he was so damn funny. People would show up. He represented some of the big names out there. You've probably heard of some Illinois politicians that he would represent and take care of.
The Windy City. It's not because of the weather.
Oh man, no, it's not because of the weather. And that's Chicago politics. I'll tell you what, I love it still to this day. It's something you hate, and you always complain. You always complain, but you really love it deep down, because it's just as much a part of you as like about 17 pounds of me is about Chicago deep dish pizza. It's probably about right here and right here, but sometimes it switches around. So anyway, yes, Windy City, excellent point, and excellent history on that. So, Ed and I were talking one day, and I'm like, hey, Ed, this job fell through. I can't, I want to move on from what I'm doing currently. Got the degree, about to get licensed. What do I do? He's like, well, you got a law degree, start practicing. I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, no, when you get out of law school, you're not exactly like, this is how you handle this. No, it's actually, my cousin Vinny was very good at explaining it. And it's one of my favorite movies, just because the lawyer thing, but also my wife's Italian. So whenever, we have an argument, a disagreement, I get to stomp my foot and go, and your biological clock. And that just kind of goes with it and kind of rolls in naturally. But in any event, and my cousin Vinny says, Marissa Tomei asks Joe Pesci, hey, what do you, what did you learn in law school anyway, if you don't know what you're doing? Well, you learn procedure and some of the rules. That's truly what it is. Fast forward, Ed says, start your practice. I don't have a clue what to do. He took me under his wing, let me use his office. And, at the same time as I'm, starting to reach out to relationships and develop a little bit of a book of business, he doesn't even let me know it, but he's overseeing and making sure that everything is going well. Which, is invaluable. It's a gift that is beyond words. Became obviously even closer to Ed day to day. Every day was like a party going. And that's when I started, through doing a real estate closing very early on in the career. This must be back 2012, 2013, perhaps. I met Brian Slater, and re-met Brian Slater, I should say. And, Brian had at this point become a neighborhood legend, because he's, one of these people that didn't become a cop, fireman, tradesman, or deadbeat. He made it. And so, people, all of a sudden people come out of the woodwork like, oh, Brian Slater, he's like the, Northwest Side celebrity. And, so he was at the time, New City had, it was in its initial phases, comparatively as you look back. But at the time, like, hey, this is something new. Nobody's doing this. And, so I did a real estate closing for Brian, and, we just sat there and talked as as we were doing some of the documents, they're like, hey, you do other things? I'm like, yeah, we do it all. It was the thing. You never limit yourself as you're starting to develop a business. And it was easy to do when I had Ed Chanu in the background, basically to say, hey, Pat, I'll handle this one for you because you're in a little bit over your head. But we started slow. Brian would send a collection file over, or he'd have a bad claim. And at the time, I'm sitting there, this is like 2013. And I don't know. I certainly don't know the law at that point because moving law is very, very, very nuanced and specific. And, even the customer service end is different, very, very different. So go with Brian, and we grew together. And, I could say, in all honesty, we had a lot of fun. By the grace of God, New City grew exponentially. I still maintain that Brian Slater is a genius in so many respects. I've learned a lot from him. And then just by doing what I did with him, allowed my name and reputation to get out there. And I really have to thank and credit Brian for that, just because he let me be me in doing the moving thing, which allowed me to kind of mold a style that is specific to moving. And it was kind of cool because, as you said, there's not many of us out there that do moving law. So, it's the Wild West. There is no script. There's no book to read. There's nothing out there. There's ancillary things that you can read about, or, things that you can maybe connect the dots on, but you're inventing yourself essentially. So, I would say, we did full service, law firm for, and still are technically. It's just, we're a little bit more of a different model in terms of selection for client bases, but, we were a true full service in terms of taking on everything for a number more years. But as we grew and did more and more with New City, and then some of the other clients that, Brian would introduce me, or the name would get out there because I handled a claim on this fairly well, and the word would get out, so to speak. We build these connections and grow. So our book of business became more and more HHG, household goods moving, and less some of the ancillary catch-me-alls. And the catch-me-all was invaluable though, because with moving, you get anything. Genuinely, anything. There's genuinely nothing that surprises me anymore. Some of the weirdest things. But
challenge accepted.
Oh man, that's gonna be. Although there was something that happened the other day that we call him the godfather of the law firm over here at Mayerbock Law Firm, Bill Soriano, and he's another quintessential Chicago attorney, and he's just got it. But he's half Italian, so we have to play that up, and you put it out there. You have the godfather in the law firm. That's always good for business. But him and I, we sat after a client call, and we're like, this is a new one. so they may surprise us from time to time, but it's very rare.
I want to give a huge thank you to the team that produces this podcast, and that's the team over at Hire. Now, who's Hire? You probably know them as Hey Lou. Well, Hey Lou has recently rebranded to Hire, Hyre, and their new website is hireup.com, HYREUP.com, and they've been fantastic to work with. It's the same owners, the same management. They're still doing an amazing job in sourcing amazing VAs. We use them from everything from administrative work to KPIs. They can help with emails. They're basically your assistant, your virtual assistant, and they live all over the world. They come from South America, Central America, Asia, anywhere where there's remote people willing to work, and the cost of living over there is a lot less. So you can save a lot of money as a business owner getting them and working with them to do tasks you used to have to pay in-office employees, and we all know how much of a hassle that can be. So if you're looking to get a VA like we use them for, we actually use them for sales. We have moving consultants that are VAs. They're perfect English-speaking people, extremely intelligent and hardworking. You won't regret working with Hire to find your next rockstar A+ talent. So go check out HYREUP.com and tell them I sent you. Yeah, we were just chatting before we got on the call, and you're like, I've handled everything from claims to contracts to murders. And
yeah,
it's like murders. Okay. Interesting. And so you really, you can really pretty much handle all these different things. And in a world where I feel like everybody specializes in something, with the vast majority of lawyers seeming to specialize in putting up billboards,
Yeah.
you actually are kind of not a jack of all trades, but really an ace at all trades, at least for the pieces that I've seen you handle for us. And I always say, like, you know, you need two great professionals when you are growing a moving company. You need a good CPA or numbers person, CFO, CPA, bookkeeper, accountant, whatever you want to call it. And you need a good legal representation and a good attorney. And because people, you know, the numbers in this business are complicated, but I feel like people are always looking to take advantage of the movers. 100%. You know, there's stigma around the moving industry, and I could go on a whole tangent on why that exists. But a lot of movers, you know, the industry has not changed a whole lot over the last 100 years in terms of the legalities of it and mover law and the regulations around it. And it has not been very friendly to the rapid advancements in technology that we've seen recently. And there's a lot of players that are shady in the industry, a lot of brokers, a lot of rogues, a lot of people that they use an opportunity to get into somebody's home during one of the most stressful times in their lives and take advantage of them all over the country. But there's also a lot of good guys out there, and the good guys get a lot of the rap for those horror stories that you see from the guys that truly are bad and are breaking the law and are taking advantage of people. And so I feel like no matter how personable you are, how dialed in your services, how airtight your contracts are, customers are like, oh, the movers, we got to keep an eye on these guys and go over everything with a fine tooth comb. And, you know, the movers, like, oh man, it's so much liability. Like, I bet I can get them to replace my whole floor because they made a scratch on a floorboard, or I can, you know, get them to do this. Or you have employees that are sometimes coming from the bottom of the labor pool, and they are also looking to exploit you. So it's like you're kind of getting hit from all angles. You're getting hit from the inside and you're getting hit from the outside. And that doesn't even count when like real accidents happen because of the inherent liability that we have. So, I mean, what's been your approach to like learning all of the nuances in this industry? And, you know, how do you handle these situations as they come up from all across the board?
Good question. And this is actually going to contradict a lot of what you hear when you're being taught to be a lawyer. You know, you're supposed to be a little bit step back from it. You're supposed to be, you know, you're an advocate for your client, but you have to keep that barrier, and there's a certain distance that you keep with your client. We don't do that. You know, kind of in line with the old school Chicago mentality, we put heart and loyalty into it, because at the end of the day, rising tides lift all boats. If our clients don't succeed, we don't succeed. We're very cognizant and are humbled by that. So at the end of the day, when one of our clients gets a bad claim or a bad allegation, which I'll tell you without hesitation, you know, and to your point about the good guys, the vast majority are BS. You know, we take that personally, and obviously we handle it with tact. Everything is tact along the way, but it does keep us up at night at times. You know, I can think of a number of circumstances that one of our clients have faced that I go to bed, I talk, you know, my wife actually manages the law firm, and we'll be talking about a case or a situation or a claim, and you know, we land there like, man, this just isn't right. You know, this, you know, A, B, and C, we're doing DEF, but you know, what is, and you, I would say you obsess, but there's a healthy reflection on every single one of these situations. Now, obviously, the majority of the time that's not the case, but what we, you know, to your point, I don't have a greater respect for anything. There's no industry out there that I have a greater respect for. So people will say, oh, the education industry, although that's kind of I won't go that, but that's got political charges to it. But let's just say, you know, doctors. Everybody loves doctors, right? Which, with the exception of lawyers. But, you know, people say they work so hard. Yeah, they do great things. But what people don't understand about the moving industry, moving owners, first of all, they walk into a situation where they're supposed to basically keep the world within some degree of control, from logistics to even just booking the move, doing it compliant, and then, lo and behold, hiring the right people to go and service that move, effectuating that move, getting paid at the end of it, dealing with the claims afterwards, all while doing that, while you're basically looked at as somebody who is not worthy of respect. I'm just going to put it quite frank. And that I take personally. And there's been a number of claims calls that I've had with customers. And, you know, it's not a script. It has to be appropriate. I'm not going to just throw it out there, but I've almost lectured them, you know, when you could tell it's a fake claim, or, you know, that something they're doing, you know, they're trying to extort because they have a damaged IKEA desk. They're trying to extort and ruin the business online. They're like, you know, do you realize that these guys moved your 5-bedroom, you know, 3-bathroom house across country on their backs into a truck across the country, back on their backs, into your place, and 98% of your things got there just fine without issue. But you want to ruin this business. And, you know, the thing is every time that I say that to a customer and I hear myself saying it, it just reinforces just the nonsense that there is out there. So, you know, to be quite candid, like, you know, from an attorney, at least how I like to practice, like, this is a dream because I get to stand up for people who often don't, you know, who are just kind of looked down upon, you know, for absolutely wrong reasons. Because I'll tell you what, there were times in my life, and this sounds, you know, dramatic, but there were, you know, we had a couple rough situations. My wife's mom passed away very, very unexpectedly right when we were about to move. And, you know, it was a very bad time for obvious reasons. We still went through with the move. Brian was doing the move, and, you know, I'm like, Brian, look, I don't know what I'm going to do here. I can't manage it. Brian's like, don't worry about it. Got it. Handled it. The whole thing went seamlessly. Not an issue. Now, while we're trying to deal with that personal aspect, you know, can you imagine trying to physically me go out with the truck and start? No, absolutely not. And then, you know, to have that peace of mind. And you know, and I use Brian as the example because that was my personal example, but I can give you the names of 35 moving companies nationwide right now. That would be the exact same way. I would have that conversation and I would have that exact same confidence. So people don't realize movers are in the most intimate situations of people's lives, whether it's just, hey, I'm a college kid who's going to move to his first apartment. That's emotional for him for various reasons, to a lot of divorces, to a lot of foreclosures, to, you know, situations that are good, that, you know, people are, hey, they've done something good. They're moving up to a nicer place. But you're getting, as you said, the most intimate aspects of people's lives. And you're right there. So naturally speaking, you're going to get the blame for anything and everything that goes wrong in their life. You're just kind of a natural punching bag. And, you know, it's not always appropriate. This is not a norm, but sometimes there have to be a couple jabs that come back. And it's as simple as that. Because, you know, a moving company owner has to take on so much every single day, very little reward. Nobody's calling up and saying, hey, you know, you guys have a great company. Just wanted you to know that. It's always complaining. You know, it's complaining from employees. It's complaining from customers. And often it's complaining from neighbors. You know, you get this whole world is against you type of mentality. But the cool thing is, notwithstanding all of that, so people like yourself, and this is the truth, have figured out a way to take all of that, succeed, and still look forward. To me, that's the true accomplishment right there. Because for me, you know, I have a single-minded approach. You know, I have to protect and be proactive in protection. Great. You know, help with some optimization, make things go smoothly in terms of revenue and profitability. Absolutely, do all that. But it's the moving company owner who that's where it's really at, because there's so many people that are the big titans of business, generally speaking, your big bankers and all this. I'll tell you what, have one of them try to start a moving company and actually do it the way that most of you guys have done. And then I'll be impressed. So
I want to take a second and tell you all about Tighten Up Training. As a co-founder, we've spent months and months and months and a lot of money pooling together resources from some of the best moving companies in the world. And we're excited to bring this to an online platform available to any mover to use at an affordable price. Tighten Up Training has over 200 videos including mover training, your highest turnover position, so that you can reduce claims, streamline operations, give your team the tools to perform at the highest level of service that generate repeat and referral business and allow you to charge higher prices, as well as sales training, marketing training, business development, leadership. We're adding more content as we speak. We've got legal training in there. We've even got door-to-door training for the moving industry, thanks to Lenny Gray at the Moving Titan Retreat. We've seen a massive explosion of moving companies jumping on to Tighten Up training since the last retreat, and people are loving it. And when you sign up and mention this podcast, we're going to give you a free 6-week onboarding course in order to learn how to hold your team accountable and get the entire team on the platform so that you can have the best off-season and summer season that you've ever had. Ideally, the best 2025 that you've ever had. So go to tightenuptraining.com, schedule your free demo today, and look forward to tightening up. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for all of that. And, it is tough for the people that are out there that might be listening to this struggling. I mean, it's the one of the lowest barrier to entry businesses with the highest barrier to success.
Absolutely.
And you're starting to use a baseball reference because I'm a Chicago Cubs fan. I would hope that you are too.
Oh, I mean, I have good taste.
You grew up on the Northwest side.
Northwest side.
But you start behind 0-2 in the count.
Yeah.
And, that like I total tangent, but in high school, one time I was at bat 0-2 in the count, and a huge rainstorm came, lightning struck. Right. And they had to pause the game, and I had to go up a few days later and start. Yep. We had to resume the game because it was a crucial game, and I had to start at 0-2 in the count, going up to bat to start the game, or the remainder of the game, I should say. And I mean, I feel like that analogy carries into pretty much every single day of owning a moving business, because it is a high liability industry. We don't get paid nearly enough for the stress and the risk that we take on, because so many movers have commoditized it, and they try to compete on price and race to the bottom. And that's part of why the industry has a stigma because of that, because they can't afford to run it like a legitimate business. And therefore they cause a lot of these problems for the ones that are trying to run it like a legitimate business. So we have to get creative and figure out ways to find money everywhere and make margins. And when a customer is trying to make a bogus $20,000 claim, because, going back to the floorboard that got scratched, then it can be disheartening. So to echo your sentiment to all the people out there that are crazy enough as I am, and you are for getting involved through affiliation in this business. There can be a lot of reward though. I mean, Brian Slater, the fact that you teamed up with him early on and grew with him, I mean, I can't think of a better role model. And I'm sure, he would not have been able to experience the level of growth that he did, because when you're running over 100 trucks, I mean, your liability is magnified, 1,000-fold, because that's even more employees. That's even more situations where something could go awry. And so, to be able to get on those coattails and grow with him, and obviously he's done extremely well. And I believe he's pretty much made an exit at this point from the industry. So hopefully he doesn't mind us talking about him. That's that. I couldn't think of he provided an amazing service, and despite all of the cards being stacked against him. For the company that may just be starting out, or maybe they're even a medium-sized moving company, what would be your advice to basically make them have an airtight preventative legal position? Like an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of I don't even know.
I know what you mean.
Cure.
And I'm blanking on it too, so don't worry about it.
So how can we help movers, no matter what size they are, whether they're starting out or larger, basically create paperwork, create policy, create handbooks, whatever processes, so that it's airtight, to limit that exposure as much as possible, so that they can grow faster without having all the slowdowns and steps backward that all these people out to get them can cause them to inhibit their growth?
Great question. And that is, it's a simple yet a complex answer, but I'll start with the simple aspect. And this is something my dad just hammered in my head when I was a kid. Whenever I do something wrong, something stupid, like I hit one of my brothers with a baseball bat or something, which would happen, he would just look at me with this stern face and he would just say, think. Well, the reason I bring that up is because at the end of the day, anything that you're going to face in business, and more specifically in the moving world, is going to require thought. So there is no quote unquote catch-all for everybody, because everybody's got a different business. Some are employee modeled, some are owner operator modeled. Some, although I don't recommend it. Some work with contractors, but it's so you have to start. And when I say think, you start to learn where your business is at and where you need to go and how to get there. And a couple just very general, right off the bat, I can tell you is number one is compliance. You have to get compliant. Federally speaking, if you're crossing state lines, I don't care if your business is 3 feet from a state line. If you're crossing that state line for business, you have to have your authority. You have to have your docs in a row, which, there's very specific requirements with these docs. It's not something you can, why I say we're AI proof is because we actually are AI proof, at least at current. I run the AI like, hey, make a bill of lading, and it's crap when AI does it. There's a lot of statutes and norms that you have to follow when you're building these compliance packets. It's not at all, don't be intimidated by it. It's readily done, but you just have to do it right. The beauty of it is, if you do it right the first time, you're not revamping it every year. You're looking at it, you're tweaking it, and that's it. And, there's many moving companies that, many of the big boys have kept the same base throughout the entirety, which is actually a good thing from a business standpoint, because you're not having to go in and change all your SOPs, change all your, do all these trainings on procedures and all this. So start from the beginning with a good set of compliant documents and compliance from the governmental standpoint. Have your authority. The wacky thing about moving, both interstate and intrastate, is most of the time the government doesn't even know what the regulations are, but they are there. So, for example, you have some differing opinions in the two sets of governmental agencies that have a say in how household goods moving runs from an interstate perspective. You have your STB and you have your FMCSA. Well, sometimes these weird little nuanced questions will come up, and it's kind of like, who does what and how and why? Well, at the end of the day, that's nothing to be afraid of as long as you have your stuff together, because you can take on anything in that route. At the same time, a good set of compliant documents and a good set of compliance, when you're dealing with a nasty customer claim, well, right off the bat, you're starting with the right tools to address this, and use those tools. Don't be afraid to. So, for example, I'll tell you to your audience here. You mentioned hardwood floors. That is a huge problem nationwide for obvious reasons. You get this little tiny scratch that you could probably color in with a brown crayon, but now all of a sudden, Mr. Customer comes in. Well, my flooring guy says, it's going to cost me $25,000 because that little scratch means I have to do the whole thing. No, that's not true. But even getting a little bit further, protect yourself with your documents. One of the things we put in our tariffs is a hardwood floor protection provision. You have that in there. You can always go back to it, and it has to be carefully crafted, because there's ways that the government's not going to like you doing certain things. So you have to be very, very intentional with your language, but put it in there. You don't have to use it always, but let's just say that unreasonable customer who, for a 30 cents fix wants you to pay 25 G's. Well, this is a good time to pull out in your tariff and say, okay, provision 27B says this, and utilize that tool. So to kind of go back to your original question, absolutely compliance. The other thing is, if you're looking to know who you are, know your identity, and know where you want to go with it. Okay, is this something that you want to pass down to your family for generations, or is this something you're looking for PE to come in and buy it up in 5 years? Those are two different models. Okay, but with that being said, there's a couple absolutes that still apply, notwithstanding, you have differing goals compared to others. On top of the compliance, big one is intellectual property. And this is really overlooked. What you have is, it's kind of it's unfortunate, a very unfortunate thing. A lot of bad actors are out there, and they're ripping off the good guys' names. They're just using it. Say, for example, and I'm not going to use specifics, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to start brokering moves in the state of Illinois, even knowing that it's illegal to broker moves in the state of Illinois. Well, how am I going to do that? I'm going to take somebody who's established name, get a website, use some creative SEO, use some creative IT, some creative development, start filtering those leads my way, and then I'm going to sell them out here. It's nasty. Our firm is actually we've worked with Cesar from Movers, and we've drafted in conjunction with Cesar a set of legislation which is actually going through Illinois as we speak to combat this very problem. So the reason I even bring that up is we have a scenario now where movers are being attacked all over the place, and then when they are able to succeed to some degree, they start peeking through. Guess what? Somebody's going to steal that. Be cognizant of your intellectual property and how you need to protect it, because that at the end of the day is going to be probably your biggest asset when you do whatever it is that you're going to do, whether you get PE, whether you sell, or whether you pass it generation to generation. IP is very complex from a legal perspective, but it doesn't have to be a complex engagement, if that makes sense. Simple conversation with a good IP attorney, or somebody who has requisite knowledge, they'll be able to tell you, okay, well, you have this name. I did a search. I can tell you that you have exposure here, here, here. I would do this, this, and this. Doesn't mean that you necessarily have to go through with it, because a lot of times some of the solutions are costly. Not always. There's some simple maneuvers that you can take that are cost effective, but it's not uncommon for there to be some very costly maneuvers. At the very least, just know about it so you can construct your business around it. Maybe you have a situation where you built this beautiful brand, but you didn't even know it. There's a mover across country who has the same name. And now, guess what? You both have interstate authority. They were established 15 years before you. So now they can sue you for infringement, and that gets really nasty and really expensive. So one of the solutions, we've seen this, we've handled this, and we've helped our clients, a number of clients with this very scenario. You come up with creative solutions to it. Something that's not going to break the bank, not going to bankrupt the business, because a lawsuit coming from that entity is going to bankrupt the business. I can tell you in a lot of those situations. So what you do is you do it tactfully. You're aware of the problem, and you come up with a plan on how to address that problem as time goes on. So don't be afraid of IP. Don't be afraid of intellectual property. There's tremendous value in your name. There's tremendous value in your brand. There's tremendous value in you, in every moving company owner, because every moving company that I've worked with, pretty much that I've seen, to at least some degree, the owner is involved. Operationally speaking, it's very rare that you have somebody who just sits back and is just a passive investor. It does happen, and we've worked with them as well, but it's not as common. So the thing is, you have to protect that name. My mom used to say all the time, your reputation is everything. And if you, right, wrong, or indifferent, if your reputation is diminished or hampered, that's going to be a problem for your business, and that's going to stifle growth. So kind of summarize: compliance, know your identity, intellectual property. And that simple three, you can use that as a formula on a solid legal basis on how to help you scale. At the end of the day, lawyers can do tremendous value to moving companies, which is what we pride ourselves on. But it's the moving companies owners who have the magic sauce and are able to take that strength and focus, on other areas that need growth, so on and so forth. So keep it in perspective too. At first I would, the strict view when I first started in moving law, I would tell the absolute strict that, the law says this, you have to do this. Well, as I've grown and learned just how moving is, sometimes you have to be creative and always legally compliant, always legally appropriate. But sometimes you have to be willing to address gaps in the law, and there are many. And you have to be able to address them, not just to your favor, fairly to the public, fairly to your employees, but fairly to you as well. And that, at the end of the day, is one of the marks of a good guy, as you said before, which is why we align ourselves with what we pride ourselves as, the good guys. And just being aware of that need to touch upon from time to time. You don't have to obsess over it, but do know that it is important.
Yeah. And going back to your example there, that like kind of a technical question. So we all know that 60 cents per pound is the pretty much across the board liability that movers carry for household goods, for furniture. But, what about property damage that isn't furniture, like that floor?
Yes.
You obviously can't weigh the floor. You can't
Right.
come up with a reasonable, 60 cents a pound on a scratch. How can movers protect themselves from that? Or maybe we've had in the past, we had a truck that cracked a driveway that
Right.
was freshly set, and the client didn't tell us anything about not parking on the driveway or that it was even freshly set, and wanted a new driveway. So what are ways that we can protect ourselves from things that aren't falling into that 60 cents a pound household goods? Most of you have heard me talk about Moversville and the power of their email marketing service that has helped us increase leads by over 112% over the last year. But have you heard of Moversville Connect? Moversville Connect is an incredible resource for all things moving. They feature an array of vendors and services and lists like insurance providers, softwares, equipment suppliers, marketing sources, and much, much more. The best part? This resource is free. Go check out Moversville Connect today by going to moversville.com and clicking Connect. That's moversville.com and click Connect and discover the world of Moversville beyond email.
That's a great question, and actually one that we get, quite often, because, we get a ton of claims, and, they're not your IKEA, typically your IKEA furniture, unless somebody's trying to extort using social media. But a lot of them are on this very issue. And this is where it going back to the very good set of documents. I can tell you right off the bat, we touch upon this very thoroughly in our Mayerbock law firm copyrighted tariff and bill of lading. It's something that we hammer on. And I'm not saying you have to use ours, but just generally speaking, take this knowledge. Take your time and be thoughtful when you prepare your tariff. So a lot of people look at it like, oh, it's a document. I'm just gonna pull it online, put in my name and that's it. No, this is a document that yes, it's a burden in a lot of senses, but it's more an opportunity. Because if you have a very good tariff and a very good process in terms of publishing your tariff to your customers, there's a lot of protection in that. So when you say property damage, that becomes a very, very complex issue, because now you're looking at state specific law on top of the federal mandates. And so it's this very big murky area. Even more so, now you have insurance involved. And every insurance, I can tell you, I work or have worked with the big boys in the industry, and I have my own personal opinions on which ones to go with and which one not. But they do things very differently. So one carrier may look at a particular claim, a property damage claim, as you mentioned, and say, okay, well, we're absolutely liable. So whatever it is, it's that hardwood floor situation that we talked about, that 3-cent fix, but 20 G's, we're paying it. We just want to be done. Some carriers will do that because to them, it's $20,000, but now your rates for the foreseeable future just skyrocketed. And in fact, that may lock you to them for some time. It's just, it's a game. And then it's more cost effective for them because they don't have the personnel to properly adjudicate the claim. It's this whole thing. So you're balancing the customer's expectations, state law, federal law, insurance. So the best way to navigate that particular process is to lead that discussion. So the insurance say, we want to do this. Okay, insurance, why? And where are you seeing that? Well, that's just our estimate. Okay, well, customer, why are you saying that it's this much? Well, my guy came in here. Okay, well, here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's our tariff, which was presented to you. The good guys will, the real sound operational guys will have that tariff available and time stamped when it was presented to them and all that. You viewed this tariff at 2:37 p.m. on X date, and guess what? That tariff has in subparagraph whatever the direct language that applies to it. So we're not liable here, but this is where you play good cop, bad cop quite often, and you can say we don't have to pay you a penny, but you're an important customer to us, and we value your business. We value, the fact that we have a good name and reputation in the industry. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to hire our own guy to go out there and fix that. So this is a situation where you're using your tools to your benefit. You have that tariff that's tight and it's very effective. And now what you can do is you can leverage that as the bad guy saying, we don't have to pay anything. That's waived right there. You never put us on notice that this was an issue, so it's not our fault. That driveway, for example. And now you go back and you say, okay, I don't have to, but here's what I'm going to do because of the value. And then you got to be careful with this too. When you do find some sort of resolution, some states actually have restrictions. Georgia has a kind of a weird restriction on releases. The general rule is if you resolve something with a client that's non-standard, which basically means that you're not obligated to do 60 cents a pound or just following the protocol. Typically, it's a good idea to get a release on there with a non-disparagement provision. Now, this is again where it gets very tricky because there's a law that actually will make one believe that there is a ban on non-disparagement in that situation. However, there's a workaround to that law because the intent of that law is more of form contracts. But if you think about it, you're negotiating a customized claim resolution. That's free negotiation. That's not form. That's not time after time replicated. This is something you and I are talking about how to resolve. So you use that as a justification to include that provision in there. And then what this does is this helps prevent people from extorting you down the line. Hey, yeah, I have my $25,000 claim. He came in, had a guy fix it for $1,000, or they really shouldn't even know what it costs you, but a lot of times they'll figure it out. So you know what? I don't like that. I'm going to hit him harder because I'm going to claim that it's not good enough. Okay, well, if that's the case, if you feel that way, well, now we have a document that says this is what the situation was. This is what you're agreeing to. This is what we agreed to. We again fulfilled our end of the bargain. So now again, you're not fulfilling yours, and that allows you, if you want, if it's a tactfully appropriate idea to do so, you can go on the offensive then, and we've done that in a number of cases, depending on what the context is. So if somebody starts blasting you online, well, hit them where it hurts.
No, I think that's awesome. And I'm assuming your firm helps people build out these tariffs, contracts, bill of ladings. For the smaller moving company out there, I know for the first several years, I was very confused by what the meaning of a tariff meant. And so can you explain that to anybody else who may be in that same position that I think a lot of movers are in especially in the beginning, if they don't have their interstate authority, if they don't have everything that a larger, more established company might have that might just be starting out. What do you mean by tariff? The difference between a bill of lading, an estimate, tariffs, contract. Could you just break it down and
absolutely
so a fifth grader can understand it?
No, and it's funny you say that because I thought when I first heard the word tariff, it was probably like a new city. I had just started with Brian, and he's like, "Oh, my tariff does blah blah blah." And I'm thinking to myself, smiling, nodding there, like, okay, this is one of those things I'm going to go back and research after this meeting because I don't know what he's talking about. But, so thankfully we've grown a little bit since then. But, a tariff, you think of it sounds like a Boston Tea Party type thing, when you first hear it.
Or we're leveraging it against China and it has nothing to do with moving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the as to a mover, especially, the perfect context is that guy who is just, he's at a point where his intrastate is going really well, but he's trying to optimize margins. He's trying to tweak things here and there to make it more worth his while. And then he hears from his buddies and, the great, like the Titan resource, for example, you guys are great at sharing these tidbits on how to, work past problems that somebody else might have faced and beat. So this person doesn't. That's why I love what you guys do. But at tariff, this is one of those things that when somebody learns, hey, I want to start doing long distance runs because my margins are better, quite simply, and there's a whole thing that goes with it. But from the compliance standpoint, the tariff is just simply the document that spells out everything that you do at what cost and what terms and conditions are with it. The tariff is something that you have to honor and you have to abide by from your perspective. That's for sure. You can't start custom picking. I like that client. I'm going to charge him X and that one I don't really want. I'm going to do Y. No, you have to remain consistent. So it's a very complex, comprehensive document, and where people often get confused because the statute itself says it has to be published. Published? What the hell does that mean? Well, it's not as bad as you think. There's no governmental entity that you have to file it with from an interstate perspective. Some states do require it. So I'm speaking interstate. But you have this document, you have it readily available. What I really like to do is through the order process, have that pop up in the customer's face because, read our tariff here. Make sure that the software can log that appearance up there because now you're not hiding it. It's right there. They have every right. And in fact, they have the expectation to read it. And that's the core document. It's the back end document. Your front end document is your bill of lading, which again, I'm thinking like, what is that when I first started? But that's your contract. It's simply your moving contract. Interstate, it gets a little bit tricky because now you have to pull in some of the regulations from the FMCSA as well as some of the regulations from the STB, which is primarily about valuation, so on and so forth. So as you do that, you want to make sure that the BOL is complex. It's not going to be as complex as the tariff, just for the reason that you don't want a customer having to sift through 27 pages. You want to try to make it in, 3 pages. Whereas a lot of clients will say, hey, just make it on 1 page. That's not going to happen. But you're trying to work with it, make it 3 to 4 pages, however it looks. And that is you want to call it a summary in a sense. It's not a summary in a strict legal term, but what it does is a lot of the provisions are not only going to have what you legally have to have, but they're going to have terms and condition references that go back to the tariff. And so what you're doing is you're putting it out there, whatever the particular provision or condition is on the BOL, but it's more further explained on the back end with the tariff. That allows you to be a lot more practical in terms of not having a novel to sign before just your standard garden variety move, but at the same time protect yourself as much as legally would be appropriate in the given context. Go as far as you can with the legal protections, because why not? At the end of the day, if the law says it doesn't say that you can't do something or protect yourself from something, why would you not take that step to protect yourself in the document? If you're negotiating a claim, you can always say, okay, I'm going to make an exception. But at the same time, you want to have that option. That's a very powerful tool to have. So to movers, looking to expand, get out from just intrastate, go interstate. You have to spend the time on the tariff. You have to spend the time on the BOL, and then you have to make sure that the rest of your docs are compliant and complementary. So your estimate has to be sound. There's the nuance between binding and non-binding that gets a little bit more detailed, more specific as to the model of the business. But you have to have, all of that has to mesh and play well together. So, one of the best things you can do is you can just right from the get-go is go invest in the time to make sure those documents are right, rather than have to do it down the line because you made an expensive mistake.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, going back to the ounce of prevention. And do you help companies basically format these documents, like all the documents that they might need from your tariff to your bill of lading to your estimate to if you have a release of liability, claims forms, hiring forms. I mean, basically the whole package from every angle that you could be exposed. And that's part of what your firm does essentially, because there probably, I know it has to be formatted in certain ways to meet certain some laws and stuff like that. So and I think there's some tightening up that we could probably even do at Two College Brothers. I mean, we've done it over the years. We've worked with other attorneys on it, but every now and then we see something new that comes up. And the reason I bring up the floor example is because guess what? We have a flooring claim. So
send it on over. We'll take care of it.
Okay. Well, it hasn't gotten to that point yet. We're getting some people out there to take a look at it on our side, but we'll see. But it is one of those very frustrating ones because there's not really an easy solution to resolving a floor claim to keep the client happy and the person who referred the client happy. But also, if it was $1,000 move and they want 20 grand, it's like tough pill to swallow there too. So, we always do what we can to make it right. And I'm still confident that, but it is on the front of my head. We talked a little bit earlier about like the issues with intellectual property and rogue movers, how they kind of sour the entire basket for everybody. And in almost every political view that I have and personal belief is to limit government overreach, limit regulation.
Oh yeah.
But the current the current legislation and regulation is, it's written by van lines. And for those of you who are versed in the history of moving, there was the Motor Carrier Act of 1935 that basically made it very hard to become a mover, and it was an oligarchy. And then they opened it up in 1980 with the Motor Carrier Act. But a lot of the policies were set in stone back, during that time. And you had these big, powerful lobbyists from the companies that had been essentially running an oligarchy for 45 years that were the voices that a bunch of lawmakers who have no idea how the moving industry works pushed through that legislation. And to this day, most of that legislation has not been updated very much. Right. And again, that is part of how the rogue movers can find loopholes and exploit certain things. Absolutely. So, part of me, even though it goes against everything I stand for government overreach and regulation, wants there to be some regulation that prevents these rogue players from being able to get in. And I know AMSA, then ATA, they had the pro mover certification program for a while, but people were ripping that off that weren't pro mover certified. And then they were facing liability because, customer angry shippers were calling them and saying, hey, this guy was a pro mover from your program. This is bullshit because it's, they weren't pro movers. And they're like, they weren't pro movers. Well, they're using your logo. And so actually ATA, I just had a conversation with somebody over there. They stopped enforcing basically using the pro mover program that they had. And I think that's where, Tighten Up Training can come in and help to create this certification program. And almost, part of me wants to lobby to make there be a certification program, because you had to pass a bar. Yes. Even a person who cuts your hair has to have a certificate and pass, barber school or beauty school, whatever it is. Every single contractors have to pass an exam. Every single industry has to pass an exam. Whereas moving, you don't. You have to send a $600 payment and a certificate of insurance to the state of Florida, and they'll give you a mover's license. Right. Interstate authority is basically the same. You send in a couple documents and you pay a small fee. Yeah. What can we do to try to raise that bar to entry for legitimate players? And I know government doesn't have a lot of the resources to enforce it as it is with the existing legislation. And, if you've ever been DOT audited, your guys probably come in like they did to us about a year ago and said, like, holy cow, like, you're like the first company I've ever gone into to audit that didn't have a stack of complaints before. Like, I don't even know why you got picked. Right. And I'm like, and I was showing him like, smart moving and our, electronic e-sign stuff. Yep. He's like, well, where's your carbon copy 4-layer, bill of lading from Milburn Printing or whatever. I'm like, I was like, man, it's 2024 at the time. Like, like nobody else that you go and audit is using this stuff. So like, what can we do from a legal standpoint, or where do you see like any legal lobbying or legislation that could get passed to help the small independent mover, or even the large independent mover, not have to compete against these, cheap race to the bottom rogue players that are undercutting everybody? Do you have any theories or philosophies on that?
Oh, I could go on for hours. And when I'm a great party guest, by the way, because when I go and everybody's talking about, I do this, I talk moving, and people are like, oh, okay, cool, okay, yeah, but then you throw up like the murders out there, like what? So no, I mean, honestly, I've thought about this a lot, and we've done a lot in furtherance. So when I mentioned that our firm drafted the legislation in conjunction with Mover Chicago, that was a powerful step. Another that's an Illinois-based issue, but it's basically a microcosm for the same thing federally. Luda, I think Luda, from H to H. We're working with her on some similar things, a little bit different, but she does a great job. I mean, she's a champion for the industry. What I see and what I've been blessed to be a part of are working with people who are champions for the industry. Yourself, I mean, Chad. You guys speak for yourselves, in the sense that you do good work, and that reverberates throughout an industry that isn't expecting you to do great. Now, with that being said, I truly believe, and we should talk about this later, Titan is a beautiful resource. It's a wonderful resource for a lot of movers, and there's so many calls that I get from new movers, and not just new movers, but anything from new movers to existing movers looking to revamp or grow or deal with the problem. And like, you know what? Titan taught me a whole bunch, and I have this knowledge now. I just want to refine some patterns. Well, there's power in that, just that ability, what you guys have, and it would not a bad idea to just kind of organize that and start a lobbying aspect, because the one thing I can tell you, this legislation that we're dealing with right now, fortunately we have a very good support representative, Kelly, from actually northwest side Chicago again, who's backing us and fighting with us on this, fighting with us for this legislation. The point is, though, there's a huge misconception in the various government entities. I had a judge that I was before, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. He must have had a bad moving experience. He literally said this on the record: "I'm ruling against you. You're probably right, but I'm ruling against you, so appeal me. I don't like moving companies." Okay, this is a judge. So this is your general conception of the moving industry and what you guys do and what you stand for. So the beautiful thing about Titan is now you're a leader in the industry, and you're not just that, but you're bringing the good guys together. And so that's a very powerful thing to start getting behind legislation, start reaching out to legislators. Honestly, this sounds, to the outside world, it's going to sound nuts, but industry education, teaching the world what good movers do, is an important thing, because right now things are the Wild West out there, and that's why I have such great respect for moving company owners, because they're dealing with this very tumultuous world where everybody hates them and still succeeding. They're getting no breaks from government, no support. And I, like you, I believe in very limited government, but the government that we have needs to be intentional and effective. And the problem is people just keep putting band-aids on things. So, this is a problem, let's just throw that at it. Let's throw that at it. Let's keep building up.
They're focusing on the wrong things. And they're all symptoms of a more fundamental problem 100%. In the space.
That's it. And the problem is, those very same people who are going to keep throwing it, they're going to be the first to point their finger at you and say that you did something wrong, not even knowing what the hell the law is at that point, because the law is not cohesive. It's not easy to read. It doesn't make sense in a lot of respects. So sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith, do the right thing, as you guys do, and it'll work out. So that's kind of the more fun aspects of what we do, is when we get into a situation where there's that gap in the law, or that kind of gray area, is making it right, by the customer, truly doing the right thing, but at the same time making sure that the moving company is protected and allowed to do what they do best, which is, like, as you said it, help people in their most intimate, sometimes most sensitive times of their lives. So I'd like to see a collective more let's team up on it. That'd be fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure we would need the legal side of any lobbying efforts covered, because that is not my area of expertise, but I can certainly advise. Because I would love, I mean, if we could just eliminate all these rogue players that, are truly out to do harm, the perception of the industry would go way up, and we would be able to charge rates like we need to attract talent to the industry, and the industry would just continue to get better.
That's the thing. Like, what blows my mind, and seeing, going through a number of moves myself, I look at, I'm 6'4", I won't tell my weight, because, I got to keep my girlish.
Hey, just come to the retreat. You can tighten up with us at the beach workout.
Sounds good.
6 a.m. The morning's up.
But I'm watching these guys that are literally half my size strap couches to their back and move it like it's nothing. And it's not that they have this natural strength. It's that they've been taught the right way to do it. They've been mentored. There's a system in place, and there's organization within that organization that makes these guys work well, work safe, and work effectively. So, what people don't realize, if you look at it, I have my thoughts on society today, but people are inherently lazy and getting lazier day by day. Moving, the opportunity in moving is a byproduct. Because, the days past, it was, yeah, I get my buddies, pizza, beer. Okay, we'll get it done. It ain't that anymore. Nobody wants to move. Everybody hates it. And that's why, it is now a necessary industry. It's not a luxury. It's a necessary industry with how things are in this world. So in order for moving company owners to realistically do the right thing and attract talent, because I'll tell you what, a foreman on a job dealing with the customer and the nuances of a BOL while leading these guys, moving things through doors that shouldn't fit through doors. That's talent. That is damn talent. And, that doesn't come without cost, and rightly so. So I agree. You bring up a very good point there. And I like the sound of Titan lobbying. So I'm putting it here. We're copywriting it for you guys right here.
Love it. Send me a message for anybody listening that wants to sign the petition and get on board with this. Let's have another conversation about that, because it's been something I've been thinking about for a long time, and
absolutely,
I think it's long overdue. Yes. Because it's the legislation and the regulation has not really been written in a common sense format that has really solved very many problems. Right. So. Awesome. Well, I know we're coming up on time. I have one last question for you. Speaking of organizing some efforts, how do we get started with a class action lawsuit against Yelp?
Oh man, that would be fun. We actually have,
and you don't have to give me a serious answer. That was partially a serious question, but we all know that movers don't tend to like Yelp. There's a whole documentary called $1 Billion Bully that, they tend to favor bad reviews, oftentimes fake reviews, oftentimes reviews that people get on their high horse to try to extort moving companies for free things or extra payouts. And it's very hard to get good reviews on there. A lot of kind of mafia-esque business practices, if you will. But curious to hear your thoughts if there's any possible path there.
It's old school Chicago in a sense, if you really want to think about it. But you're absolutely right. It is a let's put it this way. We've had some love calls with Yelp Legal a time or two or more. I am, and this is where, as an attorney, I have to clarify where my legal opinion is and where my personal opinion, and a lot of they're pretty close, but they're not exactly on point. My personal opinion, just kind of the way I roll, is absolutely not. Anybody who's going to try and extort me, I'm not going to use the words that I would normally use on your show, but I think you know where I'd go with that. The legal side of it is pretty much the same. However, it's the degree of know your enemy and be cognizant of who you're getting in bed with if you decide to get in bed with them. So number one, you get those calls. I think I got like 3 of them this week from Yelp for myself. Like, hey, this is John from Yelp. Here's $300 in ads. Okay,
you hear somebody ringing a bell in the background because they just
going. I actually started having one of my daughters answering those calls. She's 10. She thinks it's fun, and I think it's funny. Having John from Yelp deal with my daughter. Who's sweet as pie. Yeah. She won't say anything mean to him, but I don't think she's in the need for Yelp ads. But the thing is, never. My humble opinion, and I can say this, that based on my legal experiences with Yelp and some of the social media entities like Yelp, I would never get in bed with them to begin with. I would never subscribe to them, because once you do that, you're on their radar. So now you're no longer a lead. What you are is you're a customer that needs to be retained. Or if you drop paying for their subscription, you are then a customer that they want to force back into the business. They want to force you to build your business with Yelp. And not just them, but even Google to a degree, but that is a different kind of a different thing. They want to force you to rely on their business, and it's a new model these days. I mean, you have it with in the legal world, we see it with vendors all the time. There's softwares in the legal world that literally, if you stop paying, your whole practice will just fall apart because you're just so reliant on it. And that's the model that they employ. So I just, number one, I wouldn't do business with them to begin with. Number two is, obviously marketing these days is online based. Who really, you know, who's good at, going door to door, handing, hey, I'm going to be your guy for moving. No, it doesn't happen. But this is where you get a really good SEO guy. You get a really good, you get somebody who is specific in that industry and understands how to play with the algorithms. It's beyond my expertise as a lawyer, but it is, as lawyers, a good lawyer will utilize resources rather than be the answer to everything. So what we'll do is, we'll recommend somebody who's in a specific subset, an expert in that area. Use the benefit of their knowledge. The reality is it is $1 billion bully. They can do whatever they want, to a large degree, but there's ways of mitigating that. Number one is just not getting in bed with them. And then number two is doing your own, get some organic stuff coming through. And, and this is probably against Yelp's terms and conditions and all that. Actually, it is. I frankly don't care because I think a lot of what they do is illegal and just atrocious. Make sure you get your family, friends, loved ones, anybody who knows your business and about your business and what you stand for. Be active. Have them stand up for you on Yelp. That's one of the ways that it'll still fight. Is it going to work every time? Is it going to stay with that algorithm? Probably not. But I'll tell you what, one of the things that, like us as a law firm, we get hit with Yelp all the time, and it's always from people that we've sued, or there's a bunch on there right now that in the moving context we've gone after, or we've protected from. They go and they blast me online. So I actually take enjoyment in the fact, like, hey, this was an adversary, another happy customer. But yeah. You guys can't do that, so you have to be a little bit more tactful. So when you get a bad review of, once you've gone through the mechanism of trying to mitigate your dependence on them, you're still going to get it. Thoughtful responses. A well-drafted response is not going to convert everybody or fix the situation, but there is a significant percentage it will. Because I can tell you, like, when somebody, just the psychology of it, somebody who's actually discerning properly and doing their homework rather than just clicking and ordering, they're going to look at that review and they're going to take the time to read that moving company owner's response. And if it's thoughtful, appropriate, polite, yet firm, they're going to think, okay, well, you know what? I actually like that moving company owner took it personally, took the time to write this. I like that he's in tune with his business, that he cares. So there can be a reverse to that. Again, it doesn't fall with the majority opinion of how marketing should work in this realm, but I do find merit in it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering that, giving me a thoughtful answer to a question that, didn't really think there was a whole lot we could do out of it. But, it's disheartening going back to the beginning of this conversation where movers work so hard, and only to see the raving fan customers that they do generate get filtered and their voices muted, and then you have the customers that are out to get you, that are looking to extort you for something, or even competition, or disgruntled employees that are going out to tear you down. So but at the end of the day, that's the field we play on, and we're all on the same playing field together. So
that's it, man.
You just gotta figure out the rules and how to make them work to your advantage. Patrick, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How can people get a hold of you if they want to do business with you, get that paperwork tightened up, get everything in line, ask questions, help fight claims, help mitigate trouble employees, customers, whatever the case may be? How do they reach you?
I do want to point out one thing. You said paperwork tightened up. I like the sound of that. That actually, paperwork tightened up. There we go. We're very responsive. The easiest way, honestly, is just email patrick@mayerbock.com. That's PATRICK at MAYER, B as in boy, OCKLAW.com. Mayerbock.com. We're the way we do things is we're small. We're intentionally small because we're the best. And by the grace of God, we're going to continue that model going this way. But anybody who's going to be watching your podcast or works with Titan or your associates in that world, those are our key type clients. Those are the clients that we love, because number one, they're the good guys. Number two, they're smart as hell, such as yourself. And number three, they're just fun to work with. At the end of the day, you got to be able to have fun conversations every now and again. And that's kind of our what we like to do over here. So
awesome. Well, thank you for your support and everything that you do. And looking forward to catching up more at the upcoming Titan Retreat. I know we'll have some conversations before then. And we'll drop your information in the show notes as well. So if you want to shoot me a text and just spell it all out so we get everything right, that'd be great. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Until next time, everybody have a great moving season for the next couple months left of it this summer. And we'll hopefully see many of you in September. And in the meantime, tighten up. More than just your paperwork. Tighten up everything in your life. We'll talk to you all later.
Thank you, Win.
I want to give a huge thank you to the team over at Hire for helping me produce this podcast. Now, Hire is formerly known as Hey Lou, and it's run by moving company owners, and it's a VA placement agency that can do all kinds of things from video and content editing, social media, administrative work, KPIs. Heck, at Two College Brothers, we even use them as moving consultants because they speak perfect English. Sometimes they're in different time zones. A lot of them are located in Central and South America or all over the world, and they work hard. So if you're looking to find your next A-plus rockstar talent team member, then go check out Hire at hireup.com, spelled HYREUP.com, and tell them I sent you. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. If you'd like to learn more about any of the sponsors listed on this show, want to apply for the next Moving Titan Retreat, or interested in owning or working for Two College Brothers franchise, drop me a line at wade@twocollegebrothers.com. Moving out. Have a great day.